by nature we are primal. We only are what we come from,
Right.
right? So even though, like, for instance, an ape living in the wild, if it's coddled by the village for so long, it may not have a traumatic experience
Right.
because it's been like elephants, for example. They protect their young
Right.
very well, all the way up into adulthood, to where it's like a healthy bond. They're confident, they're strong, they lead their own pack. Versus if they were to got attacked or almost got attacked, right, and nobody was there to protect them. Kind of a similar notion with your family. You may feel less safe in the world because of what something has happened in your family, because the world is kind of already neutralized, if you're in the right space, right? So I think it's still dangerous. The world a crazy place like the jungle, but in the right circumstances, you can still have a peaceful life.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to this space where logic, um, reason, and also every event or every type of issue that may face individuals in their day-to-day life. Just we're going to tackle some things. We're going to tackle a lot of things. We're going to tackle some things dealing with spirituality, um, um, relational. We're going to deal with personal history, global history, world history, national history. We're going to deal with finances. We're going to deal with some of everything. We're going to take a holistic approach to deal with just being human beings on the planet. The name of the podcast is 3 for 1, and I am your host. I go by a few things: Pops, Unc, Trey, Brother Trey, Minister Trey. But the greatest title I have, three greatest titles I have: Son of God, Husband, and Father. Those are my greatest titles. And today, joining me today is who's going to be a co-host. He's going along for the ride. My own son, as they would label him, Trey 2.0.
I didn't give myself that name for sure, right? They did that.
They labeled him Trey 2.0.
Yeah.
My son.
For sure. What's up, everybody? Like you said, I'm Trey 2.0, Lil Trey, whatever you want to call me. Just call me by my right name. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm here. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited for the future with this podcast.
No doubt. This has been a kind of, they say a labor of love. Yeah. But I wouldn't say a labor of love. I think God's just been pressing on me to step out from amongst the shadows. I've lived a life prior to being saved that wasn't very pleasing to God. And so when I got saved, I made a decision that I was gonna go underground, out of sight, out of mind. I lived a life that was up when I was in the streets, up close and personal, up, front street of doing what I was doing. But when I got saved, I wanted to change not only the narrative of my life, but also the perspective of what people had about me. So I made a decision that I said, well, I'll help, but I won't do it out front. I'll speak, but, I'll do it anonymously. But God was saying, you got to come out of that comfort zone, just like he did his son. He sent his son. His son was, traveling in Galilee, but then the Lord say, listen, it's time. You got to go to Jerusalem. So he told me, set my face as flint, and here I am. Podcast calls 3 for 1, and I know people like 3 for 1. What do you mean? It's a multi-layered. You know what I mean? It's multi-layered. It has a couple meanings. Obviously, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's also an homage to my late uncle who was murdered by my best friend. We'll talk about that later. Also, just it's a play on my name, when it comes to 3. So that's kind of the name of it. Reason that we came up with that name was just to, kind of put in perspective, we are multifaceted people, right? You know what I mean? We're not only spiritual beings, we also have a soul, but we also are flesh. We deal with 3 things. And so that's how we came up with the name. I owned an entertainment company in the past, and my uncle actually had a rap name that was 3 for 1. And so it was G Noms, Dude, and MG, and that was his name. But this 3 for 1 also deals with another thing. And it deals with past, present, and future. Because we have to move and understand that those things are very important. So today we're going to deal with an issue that everybody on the planet has to deal with. I don't care if you're Warren Buffett. I don't care if you are a dope fiend. I don't care who you are. Every human being that's born on the earth had to deal with this thing. And this thing is as ancient as mankind itself. Regardless of what type of family you're born in, you could be wealthy, whatever social economic background you come from. This thing here is real. From Beijing to Moscow, from Washington, D.C. to East St. Louis, from the Hamptons to Beverly Hills. I don't care if you're a king, killer. I don't care if you're a prime minister, a president, a pimp, or a pastor. It doesn't matter. A coach, convict. You have to deal with this thing. A coward, a dope fiend, or a kingpin. You're going to have to deal with this. We deal with this thing from the beginning of our birth. And it's something that we all fight. The biggest battle and the biggest opponent that you're ever going to have, and I had to learn this, is you against you. Your greatest adversary sometimes is the way you view yourself, how you think about yourself. This thing's been raging in you and raging in me since I came to the earth. And it will continue until I die. It's a battle in the mind, battle within. They make all kind of, you got some veteran groups that have it called battle within. It's the battle in the mind. It's the battle of how do you view yourself properly? Christians, call it a war in the members. The Muslims call it the greater jihad. I know we hear about jihad and they, that's to promote the faith and things of that nature. But the greater jihad is the battle within. Even when you think about Taoism and you think about yin and yang, yin is the shady. It's called shady. And yang is the sunshine. So it's a inner battle that rages in us all. And so we're going to kind of talk about that. We're going to have to dive into that, because the way you view yourself really affects how others see you and how you interact with people. And, it's a legend. It's actually a Cherokee legend. And it's an old man and he's sitting there with his son and his son, and they're talking and he says, it's two wolves in you. And they're raging in a battle. And he's saying the one wolf is good, it's joy, peace, it is kindness. The other wolf is evil, it's anger, envy, strife. He said, and he says that this battle rages forever. So the little guy looks at his grandfather and he says, well, who wins? He says, the one you feed the most. And so the moral of that is just saying that it is very important that we recognize, how do we feed ourselves? How do we feed the image that we have for ourselves? So the question is, question is going to be, when we talk about this thing, is how do you develop self-image? How do you become think about the things that you are? And I remember just some of the things that I began to play into, and we're going to dive deep in it. But I was reflecting on this, and I remember being young and, you really don't know who you are. It's set up that your father should help you with your identity. And unfortunately, my father was young, extremely young when he had us. He didn't know who he was, so it was very difficult for him to give me an identity that he didn't even know that he had himself. So he struggled with who he was. But I remember gravitating to the things that people began to say about me. Like, okay, first thing was, oh, you're handsome, and all the girls like you. So I began to buy into that thing. And so it became who I began to think I was. So even if I had other desires, I began to lay into that. And later on in my life, it began to, I was good at some things that wasn't good for me or good to society. So I would, it went from, well, the girls like you. So it was always a desire to continue to keep that because I'm trying to find my identity. My self vision was okay, they're saying this about me, so I must do these things. And then later on in life, I began to I began to get into violence, and I was violent and was good at that. And so I began to take on that identity because now I'm trying to find out who I was. And then so I'm constantly doing this. So we start getting money. So now I'm living towards that. And so in that battle of who I am, I'm fighting with what I see, what I'm told, and what I'm experiencing. And the fight is constant. Even at 50. I'm saved and God has redeemed me, changed my life. I still struggle with who I am and how I view myself. On the outward appearance, because, God has blessed me with some things, with a pretty sharp intellect. I can speak, fairly well, and financially, He's blessed me in some ways. The outward appearance that I would be comfortable in understanding that who I am and my self-image. But in actuality, I still battle with those things. I battle with some of the things that I once did and what people said about me. I battle with what the enemy tells me from my past failures and things of that nature. So let's discuss the fight. Have you experienced that? Like, have you had a fight with the internal you? Have you had like a fight? Has it been a battle of figuring out who you are and
Oh
things of
yeah,
that nature?
most definitely, most definitely. Two things. First, I want to definitely say I appreciate you sharing that. Um, insight to what you've been through, your perspective definitely kind of helped set the tone for the conversation and just kind of got me reflecting and taking in what you said. And then also, I think I want to do a little bit more justice of my name because I think it's important that people know that although we got the same first and last name, we got two different middle names. And
Right.
a lot of times when people meet me, they assume that I'm a junior.
Right.
And then I gotta, kind of go into the story like, nah, we
Right.
don't got the same thing. But I appreciate it though. I think
Right.
it's an important thing, just kind of going to how we see ourselves,
Right.
to have something unique about yourself that you could reflect on or learn more about. So although I am definitely 2.0 proud to be, Tremont Pierre is
Right.
officially
Right.
my government given name.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it was important just to solidify that because as the people will learn as they listen, we different and we had extremely different upbringings and life experiences, but similar as well because I come from you and
That's right.
right, just in general, I've been around you mostly all my life. So yeah,
All
I
your
just
life.
kind of
Right.
reflecting both of those things and
Right.
the battle is I think is for sure it's a real thing, and I say for sure because I'm not afraid to acknowledge it. And I know a lot of people in different places and spaces, and it may be hard to acknowledge that they're struggling or they're battling with something. But I think when you come from um trauma, when you come from
Mm-hmm.
dysfunction, when you
Mm-hmm.
come from um being in a constant state of fight or flight or
Mm-hmm.
freeze, and all these things are kind of like interwoven in your upbringing and the people you see. I think it's inevitable to have that fight, right? Like, who am I? How do I see myself versus what have people told me? Because in that, there's not a lot of reassurance. There's not a lot of confirmation. There's not a lot of clarity because the people we're looking to are struggling, just as you said, right? With your dad. So I think, looking at me, definitely, I think it took me a while to see the dysfunction because I had to understand what it was. So I think that's a big first step, is just really understanding the current state you're in, right? And being
Right.
very, what I like to say is radically honest, which is like, even to the
I
point where
like
you
that.
make yourself uncomfortable.
I like
But
that.
just like, what are you in right now? What does that feel like? What is the terms for these things, and not
Right.
how would you say it? And
Right.
then, is that what you want to be known by? And
Mm-hmm.
then working to change that, if not. So, with me, kind of similar to you, um, although we had a great relationship and it wasn't always great, it's
Man, you can keep
growing
it real,
great.
man. I
No, for
understand.
sure. No,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna be completely honest.
Right.
Like,
Right.
sitting here at 29, I can say we had a great relationship
And we
overall,
did. Yes.
wholeheartedly, because
Yes.
I know how valuable it was just to have you in my life. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I definitely don't want that to not go said. Um,
Appreciate that.
but that doesn't mean that it was always healthy, and that doesn't mean it was always,
Exactly.
conducive to my growth, etc.
Right.
That's just the reality. You know what I mean? But I think overall, I wouldn't trade you or want to, swap you out or do anything different,
Man,
because
not even for the
hey,
new,
man,
not
yeah.
not even the one that might be able to
I
see through the
mean,
walls or something, or nothing
nah,
like
man.
that.
I think because I'm
Okay.
learning, once you undo one thing, you got to undo everything.
All right.
So, we can't have it our way to just go back and change this, that, and the third without everything being affected.
That's it.
So I just think in that space for sure, but then understanding where you come from, right? It
Right.
makes sense that even with
Right.
you wanting the best for me, trying to create
Right.
the best environment, you will fall short because you weren't equipped. You
That's
weren't
it.
prepared. You didn't understand
That's it.
yourself to the fullest. You didn't
That's
understand
it.
fatherhood to the fullest. So I think that alone, right, provides challenges for me,
Right.
because on the exterior, right, you may have it all together,
Right.
but we're also struggling with things that may come
That's
out
it.
in your personality, right? In
Mm-hmm.
the way you communicate your expectations
Right.
of me and yourself, right? So I
Right.
think all of that intertwined affected self-image, right? Because now I have this stark image of a man in my life that I know a lot about, but I don't know a lot
That's
about.
it.
So there's like sort of a disconnect there. But
Right.
then also I know the expectations, because you're right, upfront, clear about what you want from me, how you want me to move. But then also, that there's a stark difference of me, just how I respond to things. Like, I picked that up at an early age, right? So it wasn't like, I just kind of followed in your footsteps, so to speak.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I
Right.
definitely have my own journey and my own way of moving, I think, at a young age. And I think you recognize that too. But it was like, what do you do with me at that point?
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? In a sense, that's what I felt like sometimes. You were like, it's either this or that, because there's no gray area. We don't know how to operate in a gray area. You
Right.
know what I mean?
And to that point, what you were saying, I struggle with gray areas because where I was from, gray areas get you killed.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and I remember y'all often would say, "Why you always gotta go to somebody getting killed?" Because where I'm
Right.
from the age of 16 into my 30s, people were being murdered that were very close to me. People were trying to murder me. So I understand how much it could cost you, but I also didn't understand how my trauma affected you all, right?
Yeah.
So like so I'm battling with the identifying who I am, right? I'm no longer a gangster, you know. You've heard the stories that these
Hmm.
people tell you about me.
Yeah.
And some of the stories, and I would shut them down for telling you because I never wanted you guys to be exposed to what I did or what I was involved in. I did everything within my power not to, but I did take on that persona
Hmm.
because I did it well.
Yeah.
And sometimes as men, we want to do things well, even though if it's the bad
Right.
things.
Right.
And so I struggle with those things. And what's the ironic component of it? I always want to help my people. I love my people, like
Yeah.
love history, love, you know, read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was 16, changed my life. That's why one of my sons, your brother, is named Malik. After Malik Al-Shabazz was Malcolm's name. But I still was in where I was in.
Mm-hmm.
My environment was dictating some of the personality traits and who I was, how I communicate, how I deal with people. And so struggling with that battle, right? Because I've had tons of fights in my life. And I would honestly, because I'm an honest person, I've lost 3. And I was intoxicated every loss I
You remember those? Huh?
Yeah, because I don't lose often. I was intoxicated.
Yeah.
Moral of the story: don't drink wine or strong liquor. It will have you off right. Off kilter. But anyway, I had been in so many fights, and in those fights, it's a clear cut winner or loser, right? This fight, which is eternal, which is always going, regardless of. I remember being in a place where you would think outwardly that everything was going well. Mm-hmm. And I still wasn't viewing myself in a positive light. Yes, because some of the negative things I've done, but I've seen people, man, who was millionaires, but who had a low self-view of themselves. Mm-hmm. And so they try to compensate with other things. So the struggle in this fight is very real. And to what you were saying, when I was trying to rear you guys, I just remember saying, nobody fought for me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, nobody protected me. Like, I was like, so with everything within me was like, even though I don't know who I really am, right, this version of who I am carries some weight in this world. Right. Carries some fear in this world. So my children will benefit from that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad you said that, and I appreciate you telling me that you recognize the dysfunction. Because very often as men and especially as African Americans, and in this world where everybody wants you to get a snapshot of the best part of their life, right, people are not honest. Yeah. But I remember when I got saved, I said, listen, I ain't acting no more. You do a lot of acting in the streets. You know, you act like you like somebody, you know, you might want to plan to hurt them or do something to them or whatever else. I told myself all that that's done. But I didn't really know how to be honest with the people I cared about because I thought showing who I was to the people I love, I could damage them, you know? And so that fight continued to rage even and when having children, and which was the best thing I've ever done. Best version of me is in that. Y'all. It is it's a gift from God. I really believe it. I take it to heart. I took it to heart even before I was saved that it was a gift from God. And so in that fight, I said, listen, when you guys got here, it changed the narrative, right? It was not only me. Now in the beginning, I was very ill-equipped. It's very hard to parent or raise phenomenal people because that's what I want to do. World changers. I want to change. I want world changers. And I'm not talking about in just the tangible things of finances and things of that nature. That's cute. Them are trinkets. I'm talking about people that change how people see themselves, how they view life, if they're healed or they made whole through the people that I rear and change, that I raise, right? And so when I'm raising you guys, in my mind, I'm saying, okay, this is how you see yourself. The world sees you like this. And at the time, the world was seeing me as a gangster, a criminal, and smart womanizer, and all those things. And I started looking at you all and said, I don't want them to see me like that. Even though I didn't know who I was, I made it in my mind to say, I got to change for them. If I can't change for anyone else, didn't want to change for myself, didn't value myself. Because I remember in the conception of you all, I thought if I die, go to prison, their mothers or my mother would take care of them. So I had a very low self-worth for myself. Regardless, people say that all the time. They can put all the best trappings on themselves. I know all my partners, plenty of people who was getting plenty of money and all those things, and they said that they value themselves, but they didn't. Because when you value yourself, you don't put yourself in situations where you can lose your life or go to prison forever. That's just, you don't value yourself. You can say it all day long and you can put on the best clothes and best cars and best jewelry, but you don't value yourself when you don't understand the importance of who you are. And by the grace of God, because I do have praying grandmother and mother, um, the Lord held his hand on me and allowed me to begin to see things even while I was still in the world, that it was time to change. And even though I was fighting who I was and how I viewed myself, and I was feeding the angry wolf more and more and all the time, all because I'm in a environment where the negative wolf is celebrated. He is celebrated. He is lauded. Everybody loved the violent, irrational, angry, lustful, womanizing version of myself. The world celebrated it. It seemed like everybody loved it. Even the people that care about you. Because they can use that to their advantage.
Yeah.
You know, things get sketchy, you know. They don't like you being violent, but well, somebody, my neighbor tripping. I know who to call. They're celebrating my battle within and the dysfunction that I operate in. You made a great point, and you said that the trauma, because the trauma affects how you view yourself. I don't care. It's documented. There's so many scientific studies that talk about the Jews who went through the Holocaust, even in their genetics. I'm talking about great grandchildren have a gene that's altered, right? Yeah. They even talked about slavery and how trauma does affect how you view yourself and the world. Yeah. So this great battle within. You know, I'm African American. Let's start there. That's a battle within, you know, because it's a battle because I know what the world says, historical events, what they say about us and things of that nature. And then you couple that with your own dysfunction in your own family, it creates it forces the battle to be even harder. Yeah. And so when you said the trauma, and I think about most of the people that I grew up with, you don't know you're in some dysfunction until you're around something that's functional. Right. You don't know that, you know, your partner getting his brains blew out is abnormal until you're around some normal people. You don't know it's abnormal for a person to sell their TV, sell their life for some drugs. You think it's just normal. You don't think it's abnormal for you to be 14, 15 years old, selling drugs, carrying a pistol, drinking all day. It's just normal. You think it's normal until you get a chance to see, man, this is not normal. I didn't recognize that I was in trauma. So if somebody would have told me 10 years ago, man, you went through a lot of trauma. I'm like, no, I ain't, you know, you think of trauma like somebody that was abused, someone was in war, and the Lord started showing me. She said, yeah, you've been through a lot, homie. It's not normal for you to see your uncle take his last breath. That ain't normal. Right. So the trauma forced me to deal with the fight within me that already started. So everybody has it. So everybody has a fight. Warren Buffett's son or whoever, they have a fight, right? even though, and they can have the fight without the trauma of being around all the other things, they still have a fight because now they got to live up to who Warren Buffett is or whoever it is. So this fight is across the planet and across the human experience, something that we all deal with. But when you said the trauma, it let me know that not only is it trauma that you experience in the out world, but your family of origin can deal with how you view yourself. Your family of origin can either help the angry wolf or help the good wolf. They can feed into that by what they say to you, how they promote you. And I didn't understand that. Yeah. As much as I loved my children, I didn't grasp the verbal affirmation component of it, right? I thought it was a sign of weakness needing someone to tell you something because of where I'm from. Like no one told you, man, you did a great job, or it's you didn't receive those things, so you don't know how to really issue those things out. So your family of origin can really, I think, really is one of the probably the biggest contributing factor to how you view yourself. Not I know later on trauma, things other.
I would agree. I mean, because by nature we are primal. We only are what we come from. Right. So even though, like, for instance, an ape living in the wild, if it's coddled by the village for so long, it may not have a traumatic experience because it's been like elephants, for example. They protect their young very well, all the way up into adulthood, to where it's like a healthy bond. They're confident, they're strong, they lead their own pack. Versus if they were to got attacked or almost got attacked, right, and nobody was there to protect them. Kind of a similar notion with your family. You may feel less safe in the world because of what something has happened in your family. Because the world is kind of already neutralized, if you're in the right space, right? So I think it's still dangerous. The world a crazy place like the jungle, but in the right circumstances, you could still have a peaceful life.
Right. Yeah. I think, like, when you think about most people who are very self-aware, and I use the word self-aware very carefully, because one thing I know, when we're so self something, it's always it can be a negative thing, right? Because you can be self-confident, self-aware. In actuality, we should lean not to our own understanding, but acknowledge God in all our ways, meaning that if we are aware of who God is and who we are through him, then we have a clear picture of who we are. But for this conversation's sake, I'll say a person who's self-aware and really knows who they are, they had to receive it from some outside force too. Right. Because I think you can do a lot of self work. Right. You can self-talk. You can say things like, man, I'm great, I'm gonna be da 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 da. But we all need affirmation from outside of someone. Now, some people need it more than others, but we all need it because it helps shape how we view ourselves, right? Like, and maybe I didn't do a lot of things to make people proud, but I remember really hearing it a lot, right? When I was younger. Yeah. And maybe, my memory is slipping. I'm 50, but it wasn't a very going thing. I remember one thing, man, I didn't know it affected me, right? Until I had you guys, right? I had got outstanding at the science fair, right? 2 years in a row in 8th grade. And this is before I'm going into the wrong path, right? I really hadn't yet. I had a trauma, some kind of experience. I got jumped on by somebody, and I was a kid. I was 12 years old in 7th grade, and that affected me. Like, this ain't gonna happen no more. Yeah. Made up in my mind, what happened again? But I was still kind of on the right path, and my parents didn't come. No, my mom had to work. And my old man, I don't know what he was doing. And once I had y'all, and I remember I would try to be at everything y'all did. I don't care what it was. I don't care what I had to do. I don't care what it was, because I wanted y'all to know, if nobody's there, I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember driving, and I don't know if I told you this. When we had our entertainment company, we did a tour with the Source magazine, 26 city, I think, tour. And I was in Nebraska, right? I was supposed to fly out because you had a game. It was a Sunday.
Yeah,
I was out of town.
Yeah.
Man, I drove 7 hours straight. Wouldn't even use the bathroom because I told you I wouldn't miss one of your football games.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it just for the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And because I made a decision in my heart that my children will never feel like ain't nobody there for them. Even in all of that, I still did some damage to y'all because of, I think, overcompensating for things I didn't have, some guilt, and just not knowing completely who I was. I didn't affirm y'all a lot, right? I ain't help y'all in your ways of learning or dealing with this fight. Because I didn't even recognize the fight at the time, that you were fighting to find out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fighting to find out who I am.
Yeah.
And so I've apologized already, but let's do it publicly. You know,
for sure.
I'll do it publicly for the world to see.
For sure.
I apologize, man, for every mistake I made,
for sure, man.
The way I treated you, knowing and unknowingly, the effects I've had negatively on your life.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I appreciate that.
It wasn't willfully. It was just out of ignorance.
Yeah.
Not understanding. And so,
yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So with that, while I'm raising you and I'm trying to find out who I am at the time. Because truly, I'll say this, and people can scoff all they want. That's on them. You never know who you are until you reconnect with God. How do you know who you are if you're not connected to who created you, right? How can you have an idea what you're created for unless you deal with the creator, right? Every iPhone, iPad, or even these microphones had a creator, and they understood what they created them for fully. Even in their minds, and even the engineers that came up, they understood that. So I didn't know who I was until I reconnected with God. And a lot of people, I know myself, I've been searching, know that, they'll quote the philosopher, know thyself. I know me, and if they don't know who created them, they don't know themselves.
Yeah.
Because you can't.
Yeah.
You got to know the mind of why you're created. So once I I reconnected with God, because God was always there. When I reconnected with him, I had to deal with all of that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot, so just imagine living a life of, 30, 20, almost 30 plus years, a particular way. And now you come into the knowledge of who God is, and he shows you who you are.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, I'm trying to find out who I am.
Yeah. That's a lot.
At the same time, trying to help you find out who you are.
Exactly. It's a lot to
At the same time, deal with all of the consequences of the decisions that I made, not knowing who I am.
Right.
And what you said, that fight even got greater then.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I know better, right? When you know better, now it's real. Now it's the lights on.
Right.
Like when you're in ignorance, oh no, you don't know the damage you're creating. But now that I knew the damage and the type of person I am, I said, I got to correct it. In actuality, it wasn't my responsibility. It was my responsibility, but I couldn't correct it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to allow God to correct me, heal me, tell me who I am, royal priesthood, peculiar priesthood, set apart, the righteousness of God. He had to tell me and pour that thing in me and pure. You know how you pour, if you got some water and there's some dirt in the water, and you pour and you pour and pour until the clear water makes, it overflows, and all of the dirt is removed. So God had to continue to pour and get all of this mess and junk out of me, so I can know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And even in this time, right? I've been saved since 2007. 2007. I still, the enemy, his voice will come up. Sometimes it's faint.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very loud. Man, man. Hey, especially if something comes up. You gonna let them get that off?
Right.
You know who you are?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a child of God. I'm a new creature.
Yeah.
So now the battle is killing my old sin nature.
Mm-hmm.
The first battle was trying to figure out who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still dealing with that, but I'm in a great place, and trying to help you become the man that you are now. Some of it was retroactive. I tried to go back. You can't bend a tree,
Right.
but you can kind of help it navigate,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we talk about family of origin, I've been blessed though in my family, even though it was dysfunctional. It was very dysfunctional. Like, let's keep it real.
Yeah.
All of my cousins went to prison, and my favorite uncle had been to prison and struggled with drugs and was a drug kingpin, but struggled with drugs. And my uncle, was killed. I was involved, 4-time felons, and all of those things. But I was blessed with love, right? Now they loved me. My mother, grandmother, my uncles, my aunties and cousins loved me, but it was still dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though mother and grandmother were saved, no men in our lives were saved. And what we understand about God is a God of order. As men go, so does society go. And so with my family of origin, I received a lot of love and support from those people, right? Like my uncle taught me, Uncle Turk was first one, taught me how to change a tire, took me to the junkyard, taught me everything. Took me to my first strip club, all kind of stuff. My other uncle, first person that I got my first $100,000. First time we did all kind of tours and did all kind of stuff together. I experienced those things with them, but it was still dysfunctional. So it helped me in some ways know who I was and fight the enemy within, but it also contributed to some of the negative components of it because you want to live up to what the expectations are, even in the dysfunction. Because we were known for something, me and my little uncle. We were known for putting in work, doing whatever's necessary. And so we lived that way. And he died that way, And so that fight affects me. And that affects you, right? That trauma.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. The other thing that affects how we view ourselves is society as a whole, right? It is amazing to me, and I know it's amazing to you, is that how the evil portion of trying to destroy people of African descent across the planet, and what every European power structure have done in that attempt to paint us in such a way, initially to paint us as subhuman. And so all of you people who believe in evolution, especially African Americans, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, because Darwin was a scientist. He wasn't a scientist. He was drunk on an island, and he thought that we were subhuman. So if you believe that, shame on you. But that's your point. But society as a whole has painted us in a picture of, at first it was that we were created to be slaves, right? And that comes from Greece, when they were saying what a leader looks like. Leader has small lips, small nose, pale, and all that. So in their mind, they're saying, okay, because we have broad nose, full lips, that we're meant to be slaves. They kind of justify that. Then you have even the church, because I love Christ, but we are very, the church has the historical church is very comparable in all these things, because Pope Innocent allowed them. They wrote a bull. A bull is like a papal document that they sent out, a decree that the Pope was sent out. And so he had gotten some slaves from, and I know I'm going on something, but I'm going somewhere. Trust me. He had gotten some slaves from Henry the Navigator, from Portuguese. And to justify the slave trade, they begin to say, well, they created a construct of race. Race is not even, like, before that, it was whatever tribe you belong to. It wasn't. They created that to be able to enslave us, right? And society has painted us. At first, we were the most indigenous. We were the most hardworking, loyal, faithful. We were the moral compass of this country. And then it went from that, after slavery, to lazy, shiftless. Then now it's violent, and we're violent, and we are irresponsible, and things of that nature. So society plays with how you view yourself, right?
Oh yeah.
What you see on the news or what you see on television plays with how you view yourself. And we all know it's a deliberate trap and trick of the enemy to divide mankind, period, by this thing that is called race. And so even in that, so when you see yourself or you listen to the music that we listen to, shame, it's a shame that the music that has been promoted, not just now, it's been when I was there, promoted a violent, a group of people who are violent and anti-authority and things of that nature. And now you play in how you view yourself. How do I view myself? You listen to the song, okay. You relate to it because you may be from that place, and you relate to it, and now you view yourself that way. You see yourself on the news. Now, oh man, so are we that way? Are we shiftless? Are we lazy? Are we, so those things, you battle with that thing. And then you battle with the trauma, the family of origin. And now you're dealing with a very toxic cocktail in your mind and body that forces you to begin to question who you are. It is amazing in that fight. This fight that you fight about self-awareness and self-dignity and self-value, that it's so many things stacked up against you, right? Even past experience. I think with me, some of my past experience allowed me to, view myself a particular way, good, bad, or indifferent. Some of the victories had me, viewing myself in a high light. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I was able to do this. And some of the things that I did had me viewing myself in the wrong way. And then just historically, we know, we know historically how they've painted African American men, in particular. And even now, especially African American women. And what is amazing is very often we fall and we will support the stereotype, right? They promoted African American women as over sexualized. And so now, if you look at the music, you listen to the music, you look at the videos, we're perpetuating the stereotype. The violent component of African American men, violent and lazy. Thomas Sowell, who was an economist, right? He a conservative economist, and I don't agree with the man on a lot of things, but he was a brilliant guy from Harlem, African American guy. He has a thing that he says, black people and and redneck values. He's saying that African Americans' culture mirrors redneck society, right? From England and things of that nature. And so the fight for our identity and fight for who we are and how we think has been promoted, has been dealt with by society, historical things, family, trauma, and those things. So you got anything else?
I think really just kind of like digesting that, man, because it's a lot. That's a lot, man. Especially when you talk about like going back to slavery and just thinking about how that affects even now, right? This generational. You talked about the Jews that down to their DNA. I think that's a big thing we don't really talk about because like you can create a lot of good habits, like on the outside it could very much be well put together, but if you don't dig deep and get inside what is going on inside of you, and that's why I think mental health is super important, and that's one thing as a Black community I think we're opening up more to now
Yeah.
than we ever been, but I think it's something we like because it goes back to how we see ourselves, right? We saw ourselves as less than or not needing something that was vital like mental health for so long, and I think just thinking about personally not knowing much about myself when it comes to like my culture and race, like even though we would talk about it and things like that, but just not intentionally learning it myself until later on and understanding how genetically we'll never really be whole. And I know that kind of sounds morbid, but it's true. I think genetically we just literally altered forever. And I think once you realize that, you take a step back to see like everything you have power in now, because it's so much we don't have power in. And kind of like similar with the circumstances you brought up, we were brought up in, right? I didn't have power over that. But I do have power on how I use that, how I see that, and the man I am today. Like, and I think that's been the biggest motivation, like knowing where your power lies, right?
That's it.
My power lies in using things to push me towards something
Right.
instead of letting it affect me in a way that doesn't move me, right? Because time is something that, you know, we struggle with as Black people. And I think I struggle with as a person, but I think once you start to understand time also and just really see how much of a blink our experience is on Earth, you kind of take a step back even more and like, you know, even on my best day, I'm not going to do everything I want to do. So what's important, reestablishing values and morals and being appreciative of the small yet impactful things like a peaceful day or a fruitful conversation or genuine support. Those things I think are what we lack as Black people. We don't have any type of pure, genuine, unadulterated joy and experiences that we can lean on in our childhood. And me personally, not a lot. You know what I mean? And I think so. When you go out in the world, that's what you're recreating. You're trying to find what's familiar, but that's down a bad road, right? Kind of just what you just said, what you were talking about. You knew at a certain point you started going down that direction, but it was because something happened to make you feel like I'd rather do this and be seen. It was more valuable, right? Even though in the grand scheme of things, it really wasn't. You were a product of your environment. We all are until you get out of that. And I think that's why traveling is so important. Reading is so important.
Yes.
Research is so important. Asking questions is so important. I used to get in trouble so much for asking questions.
Oh yeah.
But looking back on it, I'm glad though. I'm glad I did, man.
You know, hey, that's a
for real.
It's amazing that as African Americans, right, we're some of the most resilient people on the planet, right? You said something, and when you said about slavery, and just think about we were, as a compromise, we were 3/5 a human being. We were property, and so even if you break it down even smaller, and you begin to get into not just the macro component of it, of it global. But if you get into the micro portion of it, and you think about the family structure, right? And it often blows my mind because in slavery, the man had no power, right? African American man had no power, right? He didn't have any power on the plantation, didn't have any power in his home. Because the master could come in, sleep with his wife, sleep with his daughter, sleep with his son, sleep with him. Let's keep it real.
Yeah.
And he had no power, right? He also had no responsibility. Master took care.
Yeah.
Master took care what they ate, when they ate, and how they ate, right? So the value of him was only based on what he could produce in the field, if he can reproduce more slaves because they're a product that's created wealth for this country, and or and Django did it in a jokingly way, but fights and entertainment, right? So it spills over to how as African Americans that we saw ourselves, but and I'm not going to say strange part, because I know, because I am a person who trusts God and believes God. Coming out of all that trauma, right? No value, less value, non-value, no control. But when we came out of slavery, we married at a higher rate than our white counterparts. We married at an earlier age. We had more land than we do now. So I think they said probably about 390 million acres of land in like 90. And now we have a fraction of that. So we had all that trauma, low value. We didn't value ourselves. But when God intervenes, and that's the point that I'm gonna swing this way. When God intervenes, we begin, because we relied heavily on God. We were the moral compass of the country because we had a special relationship with God and the things of God. God moves in, we begin to build and grow and create wealth, even though they would, come and tear it down and burn, but we would create it. And all of those things, marrying and all those things. And even when we had no value, we created value. We valued education. We value learning and asking those questions. Learning, we value producing. We didn't take a victim mentality, because that's what some of you said. You said learning how to use what the trauma or the effects to motivate you and push you in a different direction. And they came out of that, created all those things, right? We still struggle with who we are, where we belong in this country. We dealt with colorism in our own, but we were moving in the right direction. And then I think somewhere we got off track, and it's two schools of thoughts, right? W.E. Du Bois was had the soul of Black folks. He wrote that, and he was raised in a socialist environment. He was very intelligent, super intelligent, right? But he was raised in an environment where white people value, Black people, and he was part of the bourgeoisie. He was part of the Harlem Renaissance and all those things. He had a vision that the talented 10% would drive the narrative for African Americans, and that through political involvement, forcing them to give us something, that we would gain value, meaning we would know who we are, right? But the antithesis, or I wouldn't call them antithesis, but on the other side was Booker T. Washington, who said, listen, we don't want any political gangs. Just let us produce and create value, and then we know you'll value us. And so he, created Tuskegee. He had, people donate money. And when I look at both of those guys, right, and then dealing with this fight within of who we are, I lean more towards Booker now. Now, you know, early in my life, I lean more towards WE. Brilliant man. But I believe when you produce value, and that's in anything, right? We're in a place where they created value, right? I don't travel an hour away from my home unless it's value.
Right.
And when you create value, now not only do you create value within yourself, you create value for others, right? And they will come to you. And now you'll fight the fight that you have within, knowing who you are, you begin to see yourself in a different light. And so I love the way you said, I have to take, and that's what I've been on. I've been on a journey and to take all of those things that I experienced to be the motivating force in my life, to prove that God is right about me. And that's the one thing. So we talked about the fight.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about some of the effects of it, how it happens. How do we win this fight? That's the point. Everybody want to know how we win. How do we win this fight? How do we win and find out and really get to the true understanding of who we are and the inner me? Because that's what we talk about. We often pray and we say the inner me, like the inner me is a enemy sometimes. It will self-sabotage you, it will have you in the wrong thought process. So now how do we win that? How do we overcome our family of origin, the trauma, the historical narrative that which is a lie, and we know because we understand that great civilizations like in Mali and Timbuktu had the greatest library before, greater than the one in Alexandria, where people in Europe was not even taking baths. That's why they call it the Dark Ages and the medieval times. We were so advanced when it came to the things of thought. We know that's a lie. It's been debunked, and the Benin Wall that could wrap around America 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China, but was destroyed by the British. So technology beyond what we could think or imagine. So we know that the historical component of it has been colluded, has been, because of the reason to promote slavery and try to the fear of, I remember somebody in a fear of us, fear of this fear of our melanin. And so so we know that's a lie. And we know with the trauma, you just said it, we'll start dealing with, mental health is something great. Being able to have a discussion. And the word of God, often tells you that when you bring something to light, because the enemy loves to operate in darkness. Mm-hmm. When you bring it to light, that's when and invite God into the circumstance. And first of all, you got to recognize it's an issue. Mm-hmm. Recognize it's trauma. I didn't know it was trauma. Yeah. I didn't know I had trauma. People would say that and I'd be like, nah, not me. They'd be like, man, dog, you don't think that's trauma? You don't so one of my partners got killed and I saw him. I went in when they taking his car, taking him out of there. And one day I was in the junkyard and I saw his car again with his hair in his windshield. You know what I mean? I'm in my 20s. I'm 21, 22, 23. Those things are trauma. Mm-hmm. I didn't recognize it, but now I do. I say, God, help me. I invite God in, talk to professionals. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we those are some of the things that we can do. How do we win this fight? Or is it a fight to win?
Man, that's a great question. How do we win this fight, and is it a fight to win? Those are 2 good questions. I think, how do we win? First, we got to name the fight. Like, what is it? What am I struggling with? What is this battle? And it may be obviously a component of things, but you name that thing. And I think from there you have to invite something else or someone else in, right? We can't do it alone. We weren't put on this earth to be alone and go through anything alone. So I think you have to recognize, you need somebody around you in a physical space that, will uplift you, support you, allow you to feel more like who you were meant to be. And then you have to learn who you were meant to be. And for me, I definitely believe in God as well. And I think that goes to, learning who God is so you can learn who you are. Reading the word, deciphering the Bible for what you believe it is, because I know we're in a culture of like, just excessiveness. So there's so many different avenues of the Christianity and the Bible and preachers and churches. And, there's a lot. There's a lot to decipher. So I think now more than ever, it's more important to like block out the noise and the distractions and the influences that aren't genuine and pure and organic, and get it for yourself. And I feel like I've been blessed to reap the benefits of that, having a relationship with God, and nurturing that, and trying my best to live within the image of his son, and what the information and the emotions he's given me, create that to be. And that's how I've come to be an artist, a coach, an athlete, right? A mental health professional. These are all the things that I feel like God has placed in my life, for me to serve him and get the glory out of my life. And going back to understanding that, it's not about me. It's my identity isn't all just about what I think and how I feel. It's about how God sees me and what he wants from me. And I think whatever you practice, if you believe in something higher than yourself and you believe you were created purposely, you will begin to attune to the world a little differently. You move a little slower, and it just kind of allows you to learn yourself more. And I think that's what we're all on, is on a journey of self-discovery. And I don't think there's any winning or losing in that, right? I was thinking about that second question, like, is it a battle to win? You know what I mean? Winning is so tangible, right? There's always a clear-cut winner and loser, and I don't know. I don't think so. I think you determine what winning looks like. And then when you run out of your last breath, right? When God calls you home, you reflect on your life and say, was that a win? Right? And I think that's the beautiful thing. Everybody has different wins. My win could be different from your win as far as how my life went. You know what I mean? So understanding who you are will then kind of dictate where you're going to go, because you know what you want out of life and what's expected of you from yourself first.
Right. Well, that that's great. I agree with you in most of what you said. And I think first and foremost, you have to recognize what God says about you, right? And I couldn't comprehend why God was saying those things about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see yourself through the lenses of your experiences. But when I start digging into what he thought about me, it says things like he knew me before the foundation of the earth, meaning before he even created me. He knew me in my mother's womb. So he had a divine purpose for me. And, very often life and my own choices, because at the end of the day, yes, my environment did. It would have been a lot more difficult for me to be a neurosurgeon in my environment. If I just could have chose, listen, I'm not getting involved in this. But at the end of the day, it was a choice. Even though my old man not being where he needed to be, I still made choices. I made a choice to put that pistol in my hip. I made a choice to do those things, and it caused some of the fallout. But what I know, God works all things together for the good. So these things, I agree with you when you say that you have to. I think the most point where I would rest at is believing what God says about us.
Yeah,
completely.
It's foundation.
And he's going to tell me exactly who I am and what I was meant to be and meant to do. But in order to do that, I have to search the mind of God. How do you search the mind of God? By reading his word, by praying and communing with him. And so the win is only if I have poured out everything that God made me to pour out. And the win is not for me, the win is for God.
Right.
Him to get the glory, like you said. I think in other avenues, and it's just me personally, it's a ceiling. Like you can, I remember when I was younger, I was like, I'm gonna be a Muslim. I told my grandmother that, right? And she was like, well, yeah, baby, whatever's gonna clean your life up, I'm okay with it. As long as you're gonna stop doing it. And what she was resting on was knowing once you start the truth search for truth, the truth needs no support, right? But only the truth will bring you in fullness. And so I think other ways of lives, yeah, other beliefs, yes, they'll bring you in a line with some of it. But I think until you recognize that it's only one true and living God, and you believe that He sent His Son to die for us, who knew no sin to die for the sin, then you'll truly walk into who you are. That's just my personal belief. Yeah. So the win, and as we know, as you just said, we agreed, is allowing God to tell us who we are. That fight that you had since you were a kid and I had when I came out, God won it on Calvary's cross because He died for everything, every sin and everything that we ever committed, that we may walk and be named His righteousness. That's it. Hey, we appreciate y'all joining us in this conversation about the fight within. I'm your host, Pops, right, Brother Trey, and my co-host,
Trey 2.0. We riding with it. We gonna rock with it, man.
All right.